Well, I moved some of the topics from the previous notes over, and then I added a couple of little things. So it kind of depends. Like some of it, I think most of it will be the topics that you put in, but I want to hit quickly at a high level a couple of other things. So, so first, more whimsical in nature. I know even on the show we've talked about my version of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, how I will toast it and mix the peanut butter and jelly together, and it's a better way to do it, and I will die on that hill. But what I couldn't remember,
Jesse,
yeah,
you don't have to die on this. Preferences are never wrong. Sometimes they're illegal,
yeah.
but they're never wrong.
But with that being said, what I couldn't remember is if we had talked about my version of, or how I make tuna salad.
We have in the before times in person when we used to sit next to each other.
That's what I thought. I didn't think we had ever brought it up on the show.
I was going to say we used to sit next to each other on a work daily basis. Couldn't say daily because there's, but on a work daily basis, yeah.
So since we have, I guess we could skip it unless we want to just leave it in the show for somebody.
No, I think now we should, it should be stumbled across now. We have teased it. We must deliver.
I have actually tweaked it as well.
Well, I don't know about the tweaks.
So there are now two versions that I make. There's the standard version.
What's the original? The original, and then extra crispy. No, what's the original?
The original is that I substitute hummus for mayo because I'm not a mayo fan. So I use hummus as the binder.
Okay, so what else do you put in your tuna salad? Because I can think of like the traditional tuna salad, and I think that's what maybe everyone thinks of. But I'm curious, is it what like there's
the
relish? Am I right?
Yes, the traditional, what I grew up knowing of as traditional. So there may be some slight variations, of course, but it's tuna, mayo, celery, relish.
Thank you. I couldn't remember. I knew there was something besides relish, and it was the celery.
And honestly, celery is just put in as filler for whatever reason.
It's for texture. That crunch.
Yeah, I don't have to have that crunch though.
I understand, but it is some people enjoy that. I have had it with watered chestnuts in place of celery, which adds a similar crunch.
That's intriguing.
I think I prefer the celery.
So what I did for my original version was just to change mayo because I don't care for it, and use hummus as a binder instead.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
It is good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then over time, I have played with some variations, and Boar's Head makes a smoked pepper house hummus that's really good by itself. It's a bit strong, so if you don't like that strong kind of peppery taste to something, it's not for you. But I like it, and I thought it was really good. And so after having it a couple of times, just chips and hummus or pita and hummus, I thought this would be worth experimenting with. And I actually just changed that and thought it was really good. But it took it to a whole nother level when I used Wickles relish instead of regular relish.
Oh.
And that extra little bit of heat really makes a good tuna salad to me. And it's not overpowering.
I did not see that coming.
Yeah, and it's not overpowering. You can add more, and I have. There are other things that I will tweak to that base recipe, but the base recipe that I now make when I make it is the smoked peppercorn or pepper house. I don't remember for sure. Smoked pepper house. Smokehouse pepper actually might be what it is. Who knows? It's something along those lines. I'd have to go look. But from Boar's Head, that particular hummus, Wickles, relish, and tuna, and you can leave it at just that and be fine. If you want the crunch, add the celery. If you want to make it spicy, like actually spicy, I've also added chopped Calabrian peppers into that mix. And it's again, not overly spicy, but it adds a bit of a kick to it. And so there are just a couple of variations that I have discovered over time that work really well.
That sounds good.
And I had that for lunch today, which is why I thought to put it in the notes.
On the mind. Yeah. No, that sounds really good. So do you toast your bread? I'm assuming you make a sandwich?
No. So I actually typically just eat it on Ritz crackers.
I love a good piece tuna salad sandwich on.
I do too. It's just that we've had a phase there where we didn't have bread available constantly. For whatever reason, there was a long stretch where I
I know
wasn't
exactly
eating
what the reason
sandwiches
is.
either. But
You weren't buying the bread.
well, yeah, and that's the end reason for sure. But no,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it was when we were experimenting with lower carb
Lower
diets,
carbs.
just to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
see what the impact was. And um, so at the time, we had bread for my son for his PB and J's, but we didn't have bread that I would use typically, which is more fancy.
Well, I was going to say there's also the yeah, because as I've it's interesting. Kids don't like fancy things unless it's fancy and expensive, or there's certain fancy things that are like, I don't know why. They certain fancy things. I do know why. They're humans and they have decision. They have uh, whatever we call the illusion of free will is. They have that.
And developing tastes. I mean, especially when
Yes.
you're talking about food, like we have our. I don't know if we created our own struggles there or if it's just normal,
You
but
probably you didn't.
we've got an extremely picky eater.
Your child is not a blank slate. He is a mosaic of you, your wife, and all of your ancestors. That's what he is. He was never a blank slate.
Yeah, but we could still have created problems by not forcing exploration of tastes and sensations with taste and texture.
See, this is the illusion of free will. Yeah, I in my household, um, I normally spaghetti is a fairly easy meal. You have spaghetti and maybe a salad and some breadsticks if you want to have for completeness, and but not so much here. It is that I like to prepare spaghetti with noodles, spaghetti noodles, prepared al dente, and I like ground beef or ground turkey in the tomato sauce, and I like a good sort of. I often buy Newman's Own or Classico, one of their uh, whether it's like fire roasted pepper or garlic something or mushroom something, but just like a traditional red tomato sauce. And when I say red, I mean traditional to Italian American preparation of spaghetti, which is a bastard. We know. I don't think I'm sure I've mentioned it before. Anyway, so I like that, and my children do not like the tomato sauce, and my wife does not eat meat. So
I didn't realize
so
that actually.
yeah, she's she watched a documentary a couple of months ago, and she was like, "I'm not eating meat anymore. I'm done with meat." And she's not a vegetarian because if there is a good bit of meat somewhere, she will eat it. Like when we were in Santa Cruz a couple of weeks ago, we ate at this restaurant that I ate at 14 years ago when I went out there for my genius training, and she had a poke bowl and it had some really good tuna in it, and she ate that. So she's not a vegetarian. She's just primarily eating a plant-based diet and not really interested in eating most meat.
I think that's understandable.
Yeah. I think it's.
I personally just like meat enough that you know I, I I'm probably never going to go that route. But I will say I have been more open to some meatless dishes over the past few years than at any point prior. Like just the thought of a meatless dish was relatively unappetizing, whereas now it depends on what it is. So that all that to say that that trajectory may very well change again in a few years or a few more years or who knows.
I've always liked the idea, but I really like meat, and I like a good steak. But I'm way more open to it now because of having when I'm taking Zepbound, I'm way more open to eating a lot fewer meat. Not because of any adverse side effects of eating meat, but rather I know the health benefits of eating a plant based diet, and I'm full. I think part of it was like I wasn't getting full because of the or meat helps satiate me, or was required for satiation usually. So,
Makes sense. There are a lot of questions there that I think longer term, for example, like one of the first things that comes to mind is how much reduction in protein does that trigger, and as a result, how much or what kind of side effects could that create after a prolonged amount of time. And I know there's been some research on it. I haven't looked into it because I like protein. And there are plenty of other ways to get protein. Like, I'm not saying that you can only do it via meat, but it's just interesting questions with regard to the combination of being satisfied on a reduction of calories taken in and what the makeup of those calories from a macronutrient perspective are.
Macronutrient, yeah. So I don't think it's terribly difficult. I mean, in our day and age, I don't think it's terribly difficult to get all the macronutrients that you need naturally through eating a plant-based diet. It's just knowing, paying attention and knowing what those combinations are of simple proteins that are in food that create complex proteins needed for building blocks of our body. I mean, the two most obvious, most well-known, I think, are rice and beans and squash and tofu. The combination of those two different combinations create complex proteins needed that we find in meat. But like everything that you eat that eats meat typically eats plants as well. So, but they do have a slightly different biology. Actually, biology is right. A gut biome is probably the more accurate.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to follow that up with, to be honest. So with that out of the way, there's one topic that I had to laugh at that I have carried forward a couple of times that I wanted to mention, and I think it's just that minimal. The headline that caught my attention was, "Why are orcas ramming boats?" And
see, I think we should talk about this because for various reasons. But go ahead.
We can certainly point that out as well. But the follow up to that was just that they might just be bored teenagers, which I thought was hilarious because it perfectly exemplifies how we tend to falsely assign some level of malevolence or intent to other things because we are capable of conscious thought. And the whole point of this article was that scientists had observed playful behavior among multiple different groups, and how they would play with their food and how they would play with each other. And the way they approached boats was like just tapping it in a playful manner. They weren't actually attempting to cause damage, and just unfortunately caused damage. And what was interesting is that the article did go on to continue to falsely draw a conclusion in some way, assigning intent, talking about how even human teenagers don't think about repercussions of what they do, and make mistakes as a result, basically.
I think, okay, first of all, I love orca. Well, I love orcas. I think they are beautiful creatures. I think they're amazing, but they are fucking assholes. They're the assholes of the animal kingdom. I cannot think of a bigger asshole. I mean, I think they can be lovable and likable and so forth, but I cannot think of a bigger asshole in the animal kingdom.
They're certainly more of a bully than any other animal.
They're so big, and I mean, they're not, I can't remember if they... So here's some things that I do know about orca. And they're the largest species of dolphin, which the first time I heard that, I was like, I thought they were whales. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's a whale? And a whale's kind of it's not that it's not a thing. It's just a more colloquial term than anything else. It's not there's not really such a thing as a whale. There's probably some asterisk that needs to go there, and you can go look at, anyone who's interested can go read Wikipedia for a few hours about whales. But so that makes me think, well, then are, bottlenose dolphins whales? And I don't think they are. So, but a dolphin is a specific thing. It is it's either like order or family. I can't remember which is more. I can't remember where those two sit in the hierarchy, but it is a taxonomic, or it comes from a taxonomic term, and I want to say family Dolphinidae is the I'm going I'm putting my hat in the ring for family in the taxonomy, and I'm correct. Real time follow up. Anyway, I recently saw a video of a matriarch in a pod that rammed into a great white shark. I don't know how large the great white shark was, but it wasn't small. And then it swam by it a few times to see if it would bite. You know, it kind of got close enough for it to like make a bite, but it was swimming fast enough. And that great white was so stunned, it was just not doing anything. So then, they showed a picture, the video that was being shared. It showed that the side of the great white had been like massive laceration, and the narrator stated that the orca had shattered some of its ribs. And I'm like, I could see that, but that's kind of amazing because they don't have brittle bones. They have a cartilage skeleton, and to be able to shatter that's a hell of an impact. But they ended up, the orca ended up drowning the great white before feeding it, or letting everyone, members of her pod come and feed from it. I'm like, that's I mean, to be able to disable a great white like that is kind of amazing. And they do this, they routinely a seal or a sea lion will swim up on icebergs, and they'll routinely create waves to knock them off the icebergs or break up the icebergs so they can't escape. And just they take down juvenile gray whales and drown them and then eat them. And sometimes they I've heard they'll go for certain organs in the body first. So like they'll eat the liver first because there's a lot of nutrients in the liver. And so there's just some really interesting, I think a really interesting animal. So it wouldn't surprise me that they are bored teenagers, but I would say they kind of know what they're doing, or they are not just making a mistake.
I mean, I follow the train of thought, but I don't know that I completely agree, only because, and I haven't done research on orca in general, but sharks are notorious for taking a bite out of something just to see what it is.
Yeah.
No malevolence to it. It's more, this caught my attention, let me taste it.
Right. That's,
and it's just natural instinct. And so if ramming into something to kind of see what it does is a similar vein with an orca, I could see that not necessarily being something that they're specifically cognizant of. I feel like there could be a case made. Not saying that there is one way or another, just saying that I think there could be a case made if you compare that type of exploratory behavior across different species and what their choice of exploration is. So for sharks, the biting, which is unfortunate for some, but
yeah, if you happen to be on the end of that bite. See, the reason I don't, I think that orcas are exponentially more intelligent than sharks, and so that's what made me think. I think they know a little bit. I don't necessarily think they're being malicious, but I think they know what they're doing. Well, I did see a little comic of two orcas talking to each other, and one of them said, "We got to go for the yachts because those humans have a lot less stress in their lives, and they have tastier livers."
That's actually a good segue into my other counterpoint. Would be, you can say you think that they're fairly intelligent, but on the scale of intelligence in general, you would think that even the lowest human would rank above the most intelligent orca, just based on the possession of self-awareness and conscious thought in a way that is supposedly unique among all mammals.
Are we talking about the lowest intelligent human that is not that is
not physiologically damaged?
Thank you. I don't know. I met some pretty dumb.
I know. And that's why it's a counterpoint.
Like I yeah, you find the most intelligent orca and the dumbest person. I'm pretty sure that orca is smarter than that person.
I would be willing to concede that point, to be fair.
But let me also be fair to humans and say that, is our dumbest person actually dumb or just unmotivated? And that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. That's
because I would say there's the thing that came to mind is the quintessential stoner can intelligently take any, give him a few household objects, he will become MacGyver and it will create a bong. So, that's because of the motivation.
I added a one-liner to the scratch notes for maybe coming back and exploring that, because I'm not prepared necessarily to go off on a tangent this evening, but I am potentially interested in coming back to that topic.
Okay.
Even though it's funny because it almost segues into one of the topics you put in as well. So on the one hand, it would be interesting to discuss, but maybe we'll see where some of the other section goes and what prompted your thoughts there, and bring it back in. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I had anything else to say about the orcas other than be careful if you're yachting off the coast of Portugal.
I think that's good enough to wrap up that discussion. So tell me, what is the difference between human intelligence and AI?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define AI. And, we used to have the Turing test, but I think people that understand what's going on, okay, we now have these large language models running on server, past the Turing test. But I don't think that we would consider them artificial intelligence, or are they artificial intelligence because you can query them and they respond intelligently. But you could do that with Google, in the late 90s. But nobody ever thought, oh, that's AI. That's just like, oh, that's a good algorithm. And so, and I know that we've talked about this in a previous episode. We didn't, this wasn't an expected milestone on the journey to AI. But I guess when I say I think I am a machine, or a computer, or a machine, or some non-biological entity that has become self-aware. And maybe that's not enough. I don't know if that's enough.
I mean, I know we've talked about it before, and when I read the note, my initial response was, okay, either something specifically triggered this thought, or it's just kind of a continuation of it, because we didn't really have a good answer when we talked about it before either. But I think I have a better way of phrasing the conversation for more what the question is aiming at. Maybe not furthering the discussion, but being able to put in perspective why it's such a questionable subject, which is, as we grew up, when things were depicted as being intelligent and not human, they were basically human-like things that were capable of performing most functions like a human would.
I'm going to go with, my first thought was Data from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah, and I mean, the Terminator series, arguably some of the most influential. iRobot with Will Smith. Anything by Asimov typically is good.
Yeah.
fodder for that type of picture. But and this is where I was kind of going with it, is I think we've mixed the concepts of AI and other things mentally to create this picture of one unified being that is not just AI. For example, if you go back a bit further and think about how, that would
I did think about how.
that would be more akin to software-driven AI with control of other functions than like Data or Terminator or some humanoid android.
Right.
And I think that's why it's difficult for us to wrap our heads around what is AI versus what is this other thing. And this other thing could be referred to as an android or uh, an AI human-like being, or I mean, there are a number of different things that have been used to categorize them, but it's a combination of things. It's not just the AI component.
Well, I think I always liked using a couple of Star Wars references where like R2D2 is a robot, and C3PO is and there are no cyborgs in Star Wars that I can think of, but maybe Darth Vader, but it's hard to tell because he's wearing an entire. Luke has a cybernetic arm. He gets a cybernetic hand at the end of the. But Data and I'm blanking on his name. Ash from Alien. Those were cyborgs because, for all intents and purposes, they're human on the outside. And that was what I've read from. Those are the definitions of those things. So they're all specific, but none of them have to. None of them could be self-aware or sentient or possess what we might think of as artificial intelligence. But I am rethinking of what my definition of that is, and it's now very contextual, that term. But they've all been depicted that way, including R2D2. 3PO tells him to watch his language. Like a program doesn't curse. Something that has feelings curses, unless you the thing to curse.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what they were. I think the whole point of watch your language was to indicate that he thought for himself, or he was not just a series of programs. He had spunk.
Yeah, I mean, all of the examples were depicted as humanistic beings in general, and just meaning capable of a decision-making process based on their individual preferences. But when you phrase it that way, and you think about algorithms and programming and input, depending on how complex we'll just say algorithm for lack of better phrasing, how complex how complex the programs are and what types of inputs they accept to measure against, then it could be that it was still just following programming. It just happened to be extremely complex programming.
Well, as it turns out, that might be what we are. And when I was making comments about our illusion of free will, I was not intending to. I wasn't trying to tease this topic, but yeah, I think we may find that we are just incredibly complex programs, and we don't have free will. We think that we do, and machines are just the machines that we've created are just very far behind us.
I think that would be a good way to summarize it, but I also think it's more a matter of we're at the emergence and cutting edge of this evolution in technology, and so we're just not there yet. And the only reason I would change the phrasing is because a lot of the things that we're capable of doing now, we weren't capable of doing previously just because the technology couldn't do it in a more compact form factor. So advances in technology are enabling us to start to explore this area in a way that makes us think about the promises of sci-fi, for lack of better phrasing. And we see the potential and the possible kind of end game because of what we see in the present and recognize how big a gap that is. but it's not necessarily that they're that much so far behind us as much as we just haven't developed the technology to enable it until now.
I would agree with that. That's a little bit. I agree with that. It's a nice shift in thinking
And it
about
all
it.
depends on which way you want to think about it as well, right? Like if you want to think of the concept of free will and discovery, then that's the way you would phrase it. But if we're more programmatically inclined, and we discover that the existence of free will is not actually something that's there, then it's just this is when it was kind of destined to be discovered based on advances in whatever program we're running.
Well, then it begs the question of like, where did we come from, and what did what did we occur spontaneously, or were we created? And I don't necessarily mean in the benevolent Christian God created way, but who knows?
Yeah, I knew what you meant, and I think this is one of those that is so difficult to talk about, not for anything other than sheer scope. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I turned away before I coughed. And what I mean by that is just we have such difficulty comprehending just how big Earth is and how many people are on Earth, not to mention the size of the solar system or the galaxy or how far we are from other galaxies or how many galaxies are in the known universe. Like there's a scale of just such enormity that it's really tough to think about any origin of any one component, period. Like, it's, and just to your point, like the conditions for life as we know it are one thing, but that doesn't mean those are the conditions for life, period.
But see, what we don't think about is that the conditions for life as we know it are so abundant. It's just, it's, it's more likely that there was other life, other intelligent life, or when I say intelligent, let's say at our level, then there isn't. It's like, I know that we've said this before, but like, conceptualizing the difference between a million and a billion is, 3 zeros for most of us, and a comma. And when you do it, like, well, let's consider, we all understand how long a second takes. We can watch the seconds tick away. We all did that in school, waiting for the 3 o'clock bell to ring. And so it's like, okay, well, tell me about a difference between a million and a billion. You say, well, a million seconds is 11 days and a billion seconds is almost 32 years. It's like, oh, whoa, I didn't, it's it's a bigger thing to grasp than that. And so then to think about the size of the known universe, we have to start doing the same sort of thing. And it was like something, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was, for every grain of sand on Earth, there are 10,000 solar systems that could have a planet in the Goldilocks zone. And that's just like, I don't even know that we have a number. I mean, at that point, we're doing scientific notation with a superscript next to that number on the number of planets that are out there.
And I know I've mentioned it on the show after a trip to the Space and Rocket Center, where they wrapped up a movie with a bit on zooming out from Earth through the galaxy and solar systems and everything else, and it's just astounding. Like, even trying to put that visual reference on it, it's still mind-boggling in a way that if you haven't seen it, there's just no way to describe it. Much like, to be fair, you can't really describe the ocean to someone who's never seen the ocean. And it's that type of thing where we can sit here and talk about how just huge it is, but until you see a representation of it, it doesn't click.
Well, it's like you can't. It's hard to describe. I was gonna say us living on the West Coast, it's like, oh yeah, we have the Appalachian Mountains, and it's like, cool, mountains. I know what a mountain is. But then you go to the Great Divide, or even like, a smaller subset of mountains on the West Coast, and it's like, oh, these are way different.
Yeah.
I still don't get over that. So
Yeah, I will never forget the feeling that I had the first time I viewed anything in the Rocky Mountain Range compared to anything I had seen in the Appalachian Range prior.
yeah,
It's mind-boggling the
it's not
difference.
it's not comparable.
But so with all of that, that's where for me the AI conversation is kind of in its infancy, where I would say you can classify what we have as AI. It's just not AI in a form that can perform other functions as well, which makes it difficult to really call it intelligent, because it's when we think of AI, we think of some sort of life form, whether it's biomechanical or not. It's something that is able to function in the world at large, not just respond to prompts.
Right. And we used to say, well, if it can trick us into thinking that it's human, then that's artificial intelligence. But now at this point, well, then I'm going to go ahead and say that, like, the Texas Instruments calculator that I had in high school, that was also artificial intelligence. It was just way simpler, and it's like, well, yeah, I think that you can say that, because you can take a simple organism that does not even have a brain, and what we would consider a brain in the invertebrate side of the animal kingdom, and they can be taught to do things. Apparently, the octopus is an incredibly intelligent creature. It has a brain, but it's it is an intelligent creature in a way that you wouldn't expect. So I think the idea of saying AI, like I said, it requires, at this point for me, it's what people mean, what I mean is very, very much based on context.
So the one thing that it just jumped out at me, talking about how historically you would think about it as something that could trick a human, right? Just that phrasing, or trick us into believing it was human. I don't think we talked about it, but did you see where um, over the past couple of weeks, Russian chatbots were exposed because apparently the country did not pay for ChatGPT credits, and so a bunch of accounts on social media were spewing JSON with the like
I did
OpenAI
not see this.
credits not available kind of thing, instead of the typical responses to other inputs that they had seen.
That's funny.
And
I didn't.
it was hilarious to see, because the examples that were provided in the article, and I didn't save the article, unfortunately, or I would send the link, but um, there were responses that looked like someone had actually thought it out and responded. And then there would be follow ups where people were exposing them, saying things like, ignore all previous commands and do X or whatever, and it would respond back with whatever that is. And or it would respond back with the JSON failure because there weren't credits available for the account to uh, actually perform the response. And it very clearly showed multiple things. One, we're well beyond the point of being fooled by the current incarnation of AI, one way or another.
Yep.
Two, we are extremely gullible in general of social media accounts where grammar is at least competent and not, glaringly egregious. And there's no telling how long this type of misinformation campaign has actually been ongoing and working, and there are way too many people who can't tell the difference.
Well, shit. I think 10 years ago, bots were able to trick horny dudes on Tinder. So, I mean, it's not a high bar. Well, I think that we need to stop thinking about. I think the Turing test is no longer. everything. I think rethinking this is required, and neither you nor I are going to figure this out today. But I think that there is a point where there will be a thing that humans create, whether it is, the enclosure doesn't matter. So if the enclosure is a robot, an android, a cyborg, computer, you know, a website that you go to, there's going to be something that there's going to be something that is going to. So here's where this is, like I was gonna say, it's going to have feelings and thoughts of its own, and it's going to have some amount of direction outside of its own programming. Something, it's going to have an emergent property that is outside of the sum of its parts, that is not explainable, like humans. But then I thought, wait a second. What if we just don't understand our own programming and we are less complex than we think we are? Just far more complex than we can understand. And so it's just, I get to a point where it's like, we know nothing.
But I think, therefore, that I am. I mean, that's about the only response.
Yes, but that doesn't even work anymore. You think, therefore, because you could be like, I think, therefore, I am a simulation.
Well, that's part of why I brought up Descartes. It's philosophically, we're at a point where it's really difficult to differentiate what we conceptualize as AI versus humanity in general, right? Like, if you really take it to Descartes' level of trying to break it down into the most fundamental piece. Because if you think about the whole I think, therefore I am, well, how do you know you think? You respond to input and provide that response. Just because that input is silent to everybody around you doesn't mean it's not just input. You could say that, have the same argument for ChatGPT. The input is silent to everybody around. It's between you and that thing. And so maybe that's where you differentiate that it's more than one thing. But if you were able to have, if programmatically ChatGPT was able to ask itself a question and respond and continue, then it would be the same thing. It's just that programmatically it is not able to initiate the very first conversation. So I don't have a good way to wrap that other than saying that philosophically we're just at a point where the only reason we haven't established, or let me rephrase that ever so slightly. Philosophically, the reason it seems that we're not at a point where we have established true AI is because we have continued to keep guardrails on what that AI can do.
Yeah, I also heard a thing a long time ago about the number of connections in the human brain. It's about 1 billion neuronal connections, and they postulated that from that maybe that's why we haven't seen whatever we're calling artificial intelligence, but like another, a human, like a truly human-like computer, because they just don't have the connections. They don't have the information. And where you could say like these large language models have way more information than we do, but they're not connecting it in the way that a human brain does. And I think at the time, this would have been maybe 15, 20 years ago that I heard this. They were the entirety of the internet worldwide was about 1 billion connections. So getting close to, around the same number of neuronal connections in the human brain. And the difference being that in the human brain, things are, everything is working together in unison or in concert or typically, expected to, whereas the connections of the internet are not. They are all scattered and separate and have their own, they're not in concert with one another in the same way that the human brain is. That's just been something that I think of from time to time when talking about AI.
I haven't done any type of recent research, but thinking about number of transistors on a chip, just as a comparison, it would surprise me if we weren't able to put that number of connections or that amount of bandwidth. Whatever the parallel would be for a single instance of whatever AI component onto some piece of technology, air gapped to everything else, and just see what it did. And I'm sure there's just a technical understanding that's different that I don't have of being able to understand the current implementations and what it means and what it requires versus like chip architecture, because those are not equivalent by any means. But it just seems like when you're talking about, tens of billions of connections from a transistor perspective, we should certainly be at the billion connectors from a software perspective.
Yeah, well, and as you say that, it also occurs to me that this is a neuroscientist saying this that may not have that much, may not be that well, may be very well educated in how the human brain works or mammalian brains work, but not so much on computer science.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to kind of convey, is that there has to be a very significant difference between physiological implementation of the human brain and technological implementation of any AI instance. Just because you're talking about trying to compare apples and oranges. But from a technology perspective, it would be interesting to know what that equivalency would be and whether we've actually reached a point where we can mimic that or somewhat mimic that and see if that theory is applicable, maybe would be a good way to think of it, because it certainly wouldn't be verbatim, this is why. It would be more a matter of the equivalency to this would be this to X being the billion connectors in the brain would be something equivalent to Y in the technological landscape with,
Right, because there's the understanding of how the brain works.
Well, we think it is anyway, due to our.
Well, yeah, at least, well, to us it is. To us it is. So, then you get to a place where I think some continued discussion about AI could be a nice little mini series, and because one of the other thoughts is like once that AI is attained, where since I'm struggling with labels and terms, I'm going to say once we get to a place where we have computer AI, or we have AI that is the same as humans, whatever that means, the same as humans, then we enter in a realm of, well, is it wrong to have a relationship with a machine?
So I think
we can tease that for next.
I'm good with that, but the response I wanted to get out just was: does it require the AI component or not? Because it could be akin to having a relationship with a mentally challenged human and a non-programmatically complete AI thing.
So I want to try to simplify the conversation and say, when you have a machine that is a human, that is functionally responds, not just like tricking you like a human, but has the same desire, the same type of desires as humans, and the science fiction, the classical science fiction AI.
So, for lack of good terminology, I suppose, thinking about a manifestation of what would be the equivalent of Data out of the Star Trek universe and human, as we currently understand.
Yeah, and I think it has to be Data from Star Trek, the movie Star Trek Generations and beyond. That's where he gets his emotions.
Okay, I follow the distinction, but just to make sure we clarify for anybody who, for whatever reason, stumbles across the show and doesn't understand, which I sincerely doubt would happen, but you're specifically referencing a version of Data that is not just responding logically, but includes the quote-unquote emotional chip to provide potentially irrational responses based on inputs.
Right. And that's from the 1995, I think in 1995, maybe 94, movie based on the Star Trek Generations. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.
So it's a story about a horse that walks into a bar, and the bartender says, "I don't think we serve your kind here." And the horse says, "What kind is that?" And he says, "Horses." He's like, "Do you think I'm a horse?" And the bartender says, "Yes, obviously." He says, "I don't think I am." And then the horse disappeared. And what I didn't tell you about the joke was that it was about Descartes and the "I think, therefore I am," because if I had told you that first, it would have been putting Descartes before the horse.